We are beginning the book of Proverbs. And the book of Proverbs, 31 chapters. It is under the heading of wisdom literature. And wisdom literature really is a section of the Old Testament that goes from Job to the Song of Solomon. And that incorporates Psalms and Proverbs as well. That's all that section known as wisdom literature. And I just want, before we get into the book of Proverbs, I'm sorry. Now that I've confused you, before we get into the book of Proverbs, I just want to relate a story, something from years ago, different state, obviously different congregation. They had a preacher in the past, and I don't know how many years it had been. But there was an elder there who believed, he was the only one that did this, he believed that we should not be teaching or preaching from the Old Testament at all. That it should be avoided, just New Testament only. And I probably have relayed this story to you. I was in the process, I had gotten so irritated at him because I would keep tabs on my sermons as to the last time I preached anything from the Old Testament. And I knew the moment I did it again, he would be in my office on Monday morning telling me, we don't need to be preaching from the Old Testament. All right, now he's the only one that said it. Nobody else ever gave him an inch on this, but he had always come to me. And I never gave it in. Anyway, I thought that what I would do for a gift to him was to create his own New Testament minus every quote from the Old Testament and every reference of the Old Testament and give it to him. Now, while I was doing it, I was thinking, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired. And so I stopped. But it did teach me a lesson. It taught me that there's a lot of things in the New Testament that are directly out of the Old Testament. When we're not under the Old Covenant at all. We're not under that. But you cannot go to Matthew 1:1 without it being immediately Old Testament. Son of David, son of Abraham, as Jesus the Christ. Well, what is a Christ? You don't know. All right? Who's Abraham? Who's David? You don't know. If you're going to toss that away. Now, he had complained about a preacher that they had and this is why I'm telling you this story, that he had a preacher at one time that he said for 2 years, for 2 solid years, every Sunday night would preach from Proverbs, and he hated it. And he came to me, he said, do you know how long we did that? And, I wasn't there. I don't even know how long ago it was. He said it was for 2 years. And as it turns out, someone completely different who did not know that conversation whatsoever, had no idea that it happened. It was another member, had actually had a different conclusion. That they were saying, for 2 years, we studied the book of Proverbs, and that was a great thing. Okay, now here is the thing. Proverbs is quoted in the New Testament, and it's referenced in the New Testament. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 12, and I want you to see something. Now, like that fella, that elder, he would not have wanted me to have given him a New Testament minus, the way I was going to do it, minus all Old Testament references, all Old Testament quotes, take everything out. And by the way, Matthew chapter 4, I learned this one too. Matthew chapter 4, with Christ being tempted in the wilderness by Satan, you don't know a single answer he gave. You take that out, you have no idea what he said. You don't know. It would go from one temptation to the next temptation. Well, what happened? Well, what did he do? Well, you wouldn't know. But And the third temptation where, no, it'd be the second one. Is the second one? Yeah, it's the second temptation where Satan is quoting Psalm 91. You wouldn't even know what Satan was and what part of the temptation was. And of course, Jesus responds to it. Anyway, so Hebrews chapter 12, I want us to look at this. The writer of Hebrew is saying this. Hebrews 12, verse 5. And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons. Notice, you have forgotten the exhortation. Then he quotes Proverbs 3:11. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens and scourges every son whom he receives. That's a direct quote from Proverbs. And what does he say about it? He says, you have forgotten the exhortation. Now, who is the Hebrews writer writing to? Members of the church. They once knew that, and they were to keep that because it plays an important role today for us. That the book of Proverbs is universal lessons concerning human behavior, concerning types of people that have been around from the beginning. Once there was enough population to have all those types. From the beginning to today, there is still the fool. There's still the scoffer. And they're behaving precisely as they always have. And the book of Proverbs is correct every single time. Every single time. Now, the writer of Hebrews, I got my plural in the wrong place. The writer of Hebrews brings this out of you should have known this, you should have remembered this, but you have forgotten it, and it's important, and he brings it out. Now, this is not the only place where the book of Hebrews is quoted in the New Testament. We have James 4:6 is quoting Proverbs 3:34. Also 1 Peter 5:5, quoting the same thing. James 5:20 and 1 Peter 4:8 concerning Proverbs 10:12. Proverbs 11:31, 1 Peter 4:18. Proverbs 24:12, quoted in Romans 2:6. Proverbs 25:21, quoted in Romans 12:20. That's a lot of quotes being brought in to the New Testament. Now, it's not the most quoted book of the Old Testament. It's not. But that hardly matters. It is being seen as valid, aside from the fact that it's Scripture. And aside from the fact that you're not going to find anything in the book of Proverbs that is not universal to all ages. It's not just limited to the law of Moses. It's not. It's to all ages. These are as universal as you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength. It's that universal. It's as universal as you will not murder. It's that universal. It goes from the beginning to the end in all of this. Now, the book of Proverbs gives insight into human behavior, and that we can see these types of individuals today. These are character types. It's not so much their personality of, this personality is basically a cheerful individual, this personality is basically an introvert. It's not talking about all that. But this has to do with the human heart and the basic elements of the human soul, that this person is being foolish, this person is being wise, this person, and all of this is going to be centered around They're choices. And everyone can change. Someone who is among the wise can become an out-and-out fool. Someone who is a fool can change to become wise. And it's an internal problem. It's an internal problem that has solutions. And the book of Proverbs is going to be very direct in this. Matter of fact, from the very beginning of the book, it not only tells you who is the source of this book, but also giving that of the value of the book and also who's going to hate it. It's immediate in all that. Immediate. And before we begin our reading, let's just discuss the book of Proverbs and its date. Now, it's not written by one person at one point in time. It's very similar to the book of Psalms. Book of Psalms has a psalm from Moses. And it also has a psalm from Psalms from David. Matter of fact, he may be the one who's written the most of any one person. We have some from Solomon, not very many. Okay, so we have just this wide gap of time in the book of Psalms. Now, with Proverbs, it's not that wide of a gap. We're not going from Moses to like Solomon. But here we are going from Solomon to where we know with the men of Hezekiah. Hezekiah's men copied the sayings of Solomon. So Solomon wrote them, they were recorded somewhere, but now they're being put into this book of Proverbs. And so we know that Solomon, it just starts off, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel. It starts off like that. And so we know these are, this part of Proverbs is directly from him. He is the one who's putting that down. And for the first 10 chapters, there are no, what I call independent proverbs. Independent proverb, this is my term, I'm not getting it from anybody else. An independent proverb would be, this proverb concerns the slothful. The next one concerns those who are righteous and their sacrifice. The next one might be that of the wealthy and the poor. That one does not necessarily relate to the next. They're independent of each other. From Proverbs 1 to chapter 1 to chapter 10 is a monologue of Solomon to his son. I can't call it a conversation because the son never responds. Unlike in the book of Job, where you have a long, long section there of discussion, Job and his friends. But this is the words of Solomon to his son. And it is advice to him. And it goes first into the things that would be the most dangerous and the most persuasive temptations to a young man. He's going to cover that pretty quick in it. And with some of it, he's going to be returning to it. One is the immoral woman. He's going to be returning to that one. And to that subject. Now, in the book of Proverbs, we have characters. And they are character types. But we have wisdom. Wisdom is personified. And a she. Wisdom cries out in the gates. She has set her table. She has done these various things. She is ready for you. She cries out to all. You have wisdom as a character, as personified. But there's also folly who is personified. Folly, and that would be in chapter 9, and also referred back to in chapter 14, but chapter 9, verses 13 to 18, you have folly. Folly is also a she. And the things that folly calls out to. Folly also is calling out. So you have these two very powerful forces, one that's going to benefit you, one that's going to harm you, and both of them are pictured as crying out. Let me teach you. Let me help you. Let me show you the way. Let me show you what you need to be doing. I will tell you. I will lead you in this. Now, we have then on the side of folly, we have several who are there. And some of these are very close to each other and are just really different words for the same thing. But some of them are, in fact, we can see in it degrees of foolishness and going right down into abject wickedness. Okay? And so in this we have the simple. Now the simple is someone who's easily misled. The simple is someone who's not necessarily out to do wickedness, but could easily be convinced, like a child could easily be convinced to follow easily. I remember hearing it from adults, and I heard it from teachers, I heard it from parents. All right, why did you do this? Because fill in the blank. Tommy did it. Well, if Tommy jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff too? No, ma'am, I wouldn't do that. Well, then, okay, you're being easily misled by, and in this case it's Tommy, and Tommy shouldn't have been doing it either, but this is easily misled. And we see, such as in chapter 7, verse 7, and this is Solomon telling a story of what he witnessed. And we're just going to read verse 7. I perceived among the youths a man devoid of understanding. All right? I missed the first part. I saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a young man devoid of understanding. So he's this young man is simple. He's one of the simple ones. He's devoid of understanding. And what's about to happen? He's about to be brought into temptation extremely easily. We go to chapter 14 in verse 15. The simple believes every word, but the prudent considers well his steps. All right? The simple is just going to believe it. Whatever has been told that person, yeah, they're going to latch onto it. Now, it's not that they want to do evil, as we've said. It's not that they want to do evil, that they're just chomping at the bit to do evil. It's that they can just be kind of manipulated, easily pushed in a certain direction. Down from that, we have the fool. The fool is a little bit worse than the simple. We'll just begin in verse 7. So Proverbs 1, verse 7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Okay, we can also go to chapter 14 and verse 9 for this. 14 and verse 9, fools mock at sin, but among the upright there is favor. So here we have someone that they're not just being misled, they're on that path. They mock at sin, they despise wisdom and instruction. They're further down the line in all of this. Then coming down from that is the scorner and the scoffer. I put those two together. Some might want to separate those, but I see those pretty much as the same thing. The scorner and the scoffer. They are the ones that they make a mockery out of all that is good. They may make a mockery out of anything concerning wisdom, anything concerning the Word of God. They just scoff at it. It is very much like Acts chapter 2. The apostles are there in an extremely public place, probably the temple compound, but it doesn't say that. But probably that's where they are. There's a lot of people that were hearing them. And what are they doing? They are preaching in different languages. And everyone there is hearing a sermon in their own language. That just doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. And it was quite clear that these men are Galileans. All right, because those hearing these various languages, they know that guy is not from Arabia. That guy is not from Libya. That guy is not from Rome. Clearly, he's not. So a miracle is occurring. Now, what does the scoffer do? There were scoffers there. What did the scoffers do? Or the scorners? These men are drunk. Okay. These men are drunk. That's all they can do. They can't say, you're not hearing in your own language, because clearly you would know if you were. They've got to mock it. These men are drunk. Well, here's the thing about drunks. Drunks usually have a problem with their first language that they grew up with. All right, how are they going to know other languages they never studied? And I would also say that they would have spoken in the precise way that to where they would have come off as being fluent in that language. If there was a dialect that needed to be done, that's a nuanced thing that only those who were first in that language, that they would know, then the apostles would have gone into every nuance, into every way that language needed to be. But the scoffer said, they're drunk. All right, that's the scoffer. That defines the scoffer very well, but Proverbs is also going to do it for us. Then we go down from that to the wicked and the perverse. And I put those both together. They've put themselves even further away than the scoffer and the scorner. They very much pride themselves in wickedness. And they are the sort that cannot get a good night's sleep unless they have done something to somebody that day. They just can't do it. And these are rather wicked individuals, obviously. Rather wicked. Then we go from there to a very dangerous place. Now, we're already in dangerous places. And that is the one that's wise in his own eyes. And you're not going to teach that person. You are not going to teach that person. Someone that is convinced they are right. Now, every now and then, I come across somebody, it's not all the time, every now and then, because you may come across somebody and you wouldn't know what their character is at all. Every now and then I come across somebody to where you can't tell them. You can't correct them. You can't tell them they're wrong. They know they're right, but they're not right. They have convinced themselves they are right. And anybody can do it. It doesn't take a special person to come to this sort of mistake or this kind of blunder or to make this kind of ruin in their own heart. Is that they are certain. They are certain, and no amount of proofs is going to help. Because it's meaningless to them. It's meaningless. That their standard is them and nothing else. Nothing else. Now, We come to the other side with wisdom. Wisdom is going to be depicted, and this is, every bit of it is true. This is going to be depicted as ancient, before creation, present at creation. And of course, if God is creating, then obviously He has astonishing wisdom. This wisdom goes from before the earth it was ever established. And of course, it goes to eternity. Because wisdom is wisdom, and wherever there is God, tell me a time when there's not. Tell me any part of eternity where there is not, because He's all through. Where there is God, there's wisdom. There's wisdom with Him, always. And He is the one crying out. Now it's personified as a woman. Solomon, well, it's the Holy Spirit. It's wisdom being personified as a woman, and also folly as well. But under wisdom, we have the wise, and with that one are other words I think that would go along with it. The prudent, the righteous, the one with understanding. We also have the humble. We have the wise woman. We have the virtuous woman. And now we have not gone to all that are on the other side. All right, I just really dealt with that sliding scale there of going from the simple to that of the one who's convinced they're always right. But on the other side with folly is the sluggard or the slothful. Also there is the talebearer and the proud. Also there is the adulteress and the immoral woman. They're over on that side. And we're going to see from this first section of Proverbs where Solomon, in teaching his son, is going to be showing some things to begin with. He's going to be showing the enticement that's going to be present. He's going to be showing the inevitable result of following that enticement. The inevitable result. And he's going to tell his son what he needs to know in this, that there are things you cannot witness, you cannot know, and these are things you need to know. Yeah, you can't know until it's too late. Until it's way too late. Then you could come to a conclusion. So, let's begin with verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. So we know who this is from. It's from Solomon. And Solomon is also an individual that we can know that someone as enlightened and as wise as Solomon was can also fail big time. Can fail tremendously. You start playing with fire. You start beginning to do things you were told not to do. Even if you see no harm in it, you're told not to do it, all right? You don't do it because you are, obviously, there's a reason why God told you not to do it. Even if you don't understand it, even if you think it's harmless, it's not as harmless as you think. Okay, can anybody tell me, and this is coming from the law of Moses, God knew there was going to be a king. That Israel was going to have kings. In time, Israel was going to ask for kings. And He already made laws for it. When we get to 1 Samuel and you have men coming to Samuel saying, we want a king like the nations, to God this was no surprise. And also, to Samuel, it shouldn't have been much of a surprise either, because he would know, well, there's already laws for a king. Obviously, eventually, there's going to be a king. And God's already made laws for it. Okay, what's one of the laws for a king that Solomon clearly broke? Okay, not to drink wine, but I can't say that about Solomon. I can't say that about him. There's something he's not to multiply, something he's not to have a lot of, that he had a lot of. Wives. All right? You don't start collecting wives. Okay? And also, now this goes not just to kings, but also to anyone else. You don't marry individuals from these Gentile nations unless they have faith in Jehovah God. Now, there's nothing wrong with marrying Rahab because she obviously believed, and she did. Nothing wrong with marrying Ruth. She obviously believed and married Boaz. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But he was playing around with fire. There's also a thing of you're not supposed to be collecting military might, such as collecting horses, which he was doing that too. And but we need to understand that the Bible will present the people as they are, with their flaws, even someone like Solomon. Now, Christ is the only one that has no flaw whatsoever. He was God in the flesh. He is God. He was here on the earth, God in the flesh, tempted in every way as we are, yet without sin. For the rest of us, we sin, even someone as wise as Solomon was. And in his youth, he was solid. There's no doubt about that, though began playing with fire. You start playing with fire, you think when you are solid and that you're going to be able to handle these things, and there's a reason why God told you not to do it, because you won't be able to handle it. So, in having all those foreign wives, what did Solomon do? He didn't do it immediately, but eventually he does. He begins to build shrines and temples for all these various gods of all the Canaanites and all these nations that he's brought in these wives. They brought in their idols, and now he's honoring those idols. Now, for someone doing something like that, under the law of Moses, what is the penalty for building a shrine to, or an altar to some foreign god, worshiping some foreign god, or a place where a foreign god could be worshipped? What's the penalty for that? It's death. It's a death penalty for that. And of course, Solomon's king, who's going to do it? Yeah, and even David wouldn't kill Saul. Now, Saul wasn't doing that, but Saul was an evil king. He'd become a madman. And David wasn't even going to take care of Saul. He's going to let God judge. He's going to let God do that. And it was the wisest thing for David to do, because no one could call him a usurper, which actually there were those that were calling him that already. All right, when he had done Saul nothing but good. Now, let's go. So the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, he can still give wisdom. And at this point in time, obviously, he's got a lot of strength at this point in time. Notice, verse 2 gives the value of the book, and it's an extraordinary value. To know wisdom and instruction. To perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase learning, and a man of understanding will attain wise counsel. To understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. Now we'll get to verse 7 in just a second. So here is the value of the book of Proverbs. The book of Proverbs. And it's not a small value either. This is phenomenal value. To know wisdom and instruction, All right? Now that's saying a lot. That's saying you read this book, you take this book. Now you've got to consume it. You can't just, it's not light reading for you to zoom right through it. You consume it. You consider it. You apply it. You see it in others, and you can. You can. There's not a single thing in here that someone on this earth isn't doing right now. Not a single thing that someone isn't doing right now in our own generation. To perceive the words of understanding, so getting those and being perceptive to it. It's not just words sliding by. That to perceive it. To receive instruction, the instruction of wisdom. The instruction of wisdom can have some pain to it. That, yeah, I have played the fool. That's what Saul said to David, and he would continue to do it. He wasn't very long back to his senses. But that with this, we can receive the instruction of wisdom. And sometimes what is wise is not what we want to do. What is wise, we can see something else, and this is what I'd rather be doing, but wisdom always stands. And as Solomon is going to be telling his son, there's an inevitable consequence for going after foolishness and folly and rejecting wisdom. There is, and you could, as I say, you could set your watch by it. That this is what's going to happen. You can be assured as you are that the law of gravity works today like it did yesterday. It's not changing. It doesn't change. As the laws that concern all this, the material realm, whether it's laws over matter or laws over waves, as in radio waves and light and all of that, laws concerning atomic particles, all of those continue precisely as they always have. So too will these proverbs be true. And someone who rejects wisdom is going down a path that has been taken. That is a well-worn path, and it leads to the same place. That doesn't change. It leads to the same place, and no one is going to mock God and think that I can do whatever I want to do and I won't get burned. I can play with fire and I won't get burned. I can do these things and I will walk away smiling. Well, maybe to begin with, but eventually that's going to change. Eventually. Now, let's continue on. All right, to perceive words of understanding. 3, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. All this is going to be talked about. All this is going to be discussed in this book, because I don't see this book as being very big. I mean, really, compared to other books, this book is thin, 31 chapters, but it's not that many pages to it. And there it is, right there. It's going to have all that in these few pages. I haven't counted them. In these few pages, how is it going to do that? Because God can use extraordinary means in language to teach us something. There's what's known as economy of words. God can do it. God can also set down principles in just a few words, and He doesn't have to go through everything about it, just setting down the principles. And also, there are things in this that there is a message that is implied. It's an implied message as well that lies underneath this, and lesson upon lesson upon lesson upon lesson can be found. It's extremely powerful. The Word of God. Always. So what is found in here? The instruction of wisdom, justice, judgment, and equity. To give prudence to the simple. So the simple can rise up. Doesn't have to be simple anymore. To the young man, knowledge and discretion. So, okay, it's value not only to the simple, whatever the age that person happens to be, but also to the young. To the young, you have knowledge and discretion. To be able to see the traps laid out for you. To see those traps. And to know, not there, not there, not there, not there. There's a better path. Okay, I'll choose a better path. There is discretion. There is the knowledge that such traps exist, and they're not for your betterment. They're not for your betterment at all. A wise man, look at this, a wise man will hear and increase learning. So this isn't just for the young and the simple, that someone who already has wisdom will increase in wisdom. So that would mean that there is no one on this earth today or who has ever existed or will exist who will graduate from this book of where, I don't need that anymore. I can set that aside. I've graduated from that. I'm so much older than that. I remember going from the first grade to the second grade. And all those baby books I left behind. All right, I don't even want to look at them. Those are for first graders, not for second graders. I am so much better than that. All right, with the book of Proverbs, you don't move up. As far as, or I should say, you don't move away from this book. You don't rise above this book. You don't do it. You will rise because of it, but you will never rise over it. That the wise man will hear and increase learning, and that is a definite. There's always something more. There always is. All right, now we'll just finish out through verse 6. And a man of understanding will attain wise counsel. So that's a Hebrew parallelism. It's saying the same thing. Man of understanding, attaining wise counsel. Verse 6, to understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. Okay, so a proverb are short sayings of wisdom. That's what they are. And this is what we have in this book. It's more than just short sayings of wisdom. All of it is wisdom, but there's more than just short sayings, because we're going to have discussions that are more than just a couple of sentences. I'm not going to say large because the book isn't large. But what's an enigma?
My Bible says dark sayings.
Dark sayings, that's another good one. An enigma is a mystery. An enigma is something that, it's like a puzzle. And of course, riddles, the words of the wise and their riddles, well, that's Hebrew parallelism of enigma and riddle mean the same thing. Or, okay, there are differences in it, but they're getting to the same point of something may seem, we might call enigmatic, mysterious, that I know there's something to it, or I think there's something to it, but I can't quite grasp hold of it. What is this mysterious thing? Well, this helps us in understanding a proverb, the enigma, the words of the wise, and the riddles. Now, we go to verse 7, which we're not doing today. We'll start here tomorrow. And here are those who will hate this book. Verse 7, after saying the value of the book, here's the very ones that don't want the value of this book. The very ones. And it's very pointed at this. And is it true? Yeah. In a laughing sort of way, it's true. In a laughing sort of way. It is definitely true. Okay, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We want to continue in the book of Proverbs. And it is a beautiful study, a very powerful study, and do not think that somehow anyone on this earth knows everything you can know. And we've already discussed this, but don't think that there's anyone who can know everything there is to discuss in the book of Proverbs. That would be God. All right? None of us. We do our best. And hopefully we can continue next week. Thank you, everybody.